They also get a list of pro bono lawyers, and there must be notice and a hearing. An immigration judge indicated that ICE suggests that DBU has a gang affiliation. There you go. That's due process. You might not agree with that due process. You might not like the outcome, but that is process.
Under President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi, this Justice Department will never back down. We will take back America, one case at a time.
A federal judge now gifting illegal alien deportees access to pro bono lawyers, but the judges might as well be pro bono working for them anyways. But the pro bono lawyers, free lawyers for illegals, is where this is going. We've always had questions about this because we've joked saying eventually due process would be so expanded according to the left that they'd get full-blown jury trials, they'd get appointed ACLU gangbang lawyers, they'd get private first flights to and from their trials, and red carpets on the way into court, which is basically where this is going. So this is being reported via Inner City Press, Matthew Russell Lee reporting, and he's telling us that they were inside the courtroom in the Southern District of New York hearing on an Alien Enemies Act case in front of Judge Hellerstein. Here's what happened. Writing, judge comes in, takes the bench. Simple deportation case. Hellerstein says, all right, what are we doing here? Somebody responds there and says, well, Your Honor, if we don't get an injunction, if we don't get an order, these people are going to be removed from the country immediately. Judge says, well, what I'm understanding here is absent these decisions, people are going to be removed, right? Unless I do something, people are going to go. And we saw the Supreme Court came down, and Justice Sotomayor in the Supreme Court has shown that the preparations the government made to remove people are already underway. So I'm the judge, right, Hellerstein, and I think that there is irreparable harm. It would be obvious if they're removed, that's irreparable harm. The jails in El Salvador are not appetizing, to say the least. The judge's like, I wouldn't want to go there. So why would we send these gangbanging illegals over there? He says, Senator Holland, the judge is writing this, went and made findings about the conditions, and they're horrible. This judge, no one cares what your position is on these foreign jails. They're foreign citizens. They can deal with their jails in their own countries. Well, I don't want to send them over there because it's not that comfortable. The Supreme Court freezing things will allow courts to consider these things without the dangers, because you don't want the gangbangers to have bad back on their cots down there. The DOJ lawyer comes in. Your Honor, the government disagrees with that, okay? Aliens are removed all the time. Aliens are removed every day. We don't have judges considering whether or not they're getting massages before bed. Says Tren de Aragua was formed in prisons, okay? They know how to operate there. They're birthed out of prisons, molded by it. ICE has limited, judge says, well, there is no indication that ICE cannot handle this, right? He's gonna say ICE has limited capacity. We can't store all these gangbangers in all of our facilities. He says there's no indication ICE cannot handle this. Our jails have experience with gangs too. So we'd rather have the gangbangers in our jails and our prison guards to avoid further actions against the public. So we'll just keep them here. He says, Your Honor, the DOJ lawyer, Tren de Aragua, they're everywhere, man. They forced Aurora, Colorado to declare a state of emergency. This is a real threat to America. They took over apartment buildings down there. The president was elected on this, and it remains his most popular policy despite all of your efforts to change that. Judge says, well, what about due process of law? Your Honor, they're illegal aliens. It's a flexible standard that applies to them, right? They are getting provided due process of law. It's not a question of judges like taking an MSNBC talking point. Says, Your Honor, we have a declaration here from Officer Dawson. Now the notices are in Spanish too. They're getting due process, okay? They get notice and they get an opportunity to adjudicate their habeas petition, which is what we've always said was appropriate. Notice and opportunity to be heard. Trump has always said that's appropriate. File your petition in habeas. They don't want to do that because they want a nationwide injunction to just stop everything all at once. Okay, fine. It's in Spanish too, all right? They're getting notice in Spanish. Well, the INA lays out what the notice should be, says the judge. The Immigration Act. Oh, that's fine if it does, but we're using the Alien Enemies Act. That's another act that was passed by Congress and signed into law. So we don't have to comply with the INA, which has been the point we've been making here, that the INA judges are overruled by operation of the Alien Enemies Act, which was always the right argument to make. The poison pill attorney, Ezra Ruvani, was the individual who said it was an administrative error. Never was. Overruled. Judge says, well, I think what we're ordering here, they need at least 10 days to get counsel. They also get a list of pro bono lawyers, and there must be notice and a hearing. A list of free lawyers, ACLU gangbanging lawyers who are going to come in and obviously represent them for free, right? And we were commenting on this saying it's going to get down to the granular details on this. How much time, what's on the form. Pro bono lawyers, at least they're not appointing them. That's going to be the next step. Come appoint, and we're all going to have to pay for it too, America. You're welcome. A list of pro bono lawyers for the illegals. And there must be a notice and a hearing. Now, I don't know if this is an opportunity opportunity for a hearing or a notice. Because the other option for the Trump administration, obviously, is to just say, look, we can deport you here, or we can hold you in these conditions, or you can go home and just get out of here if you sign this waiver, right? But then the gangbang lawyers are going to try to keep them here so they can file habeas. And if they start filing habeas and we start getting some rulings on these in the right districts, it might put a lot of this to bed pretty quickly, which is why they're trying to avoid that. That's the point, right? They're trying to get class action certifications to stop that from happening, because they know once we get some adverse habeas rulings, once a couple judges say, oh yeah, MS-13, they can go. They took over Colorado. Oh yeah, Tren de Aragua, they can go too, right? They took over Colorado. Then you get those anchored in, then other judges say, yeah, got to follow that. So Hellerstein, the judge, says, you know, since these people are detained, the need for haste is questionable. You don't have to deport them quickly since you have them in custody. So 10 days is fine. DOJ lawyer says, Your Honor, we don't believe the INA applies here. It's the Alien Enemies Act, so we don't need to follow the 10 days time that's in that statute. Well, Judge Hellerstein says, Your Honor, this is so pathetic. I've seen the pictures of the people bent over. How is that any way to treat people? Is a tattoo actual hostilities? So he's just like sympathizing with the gangs down there, and they're being treated aggressively because they're murderers and gangbangers. Is that any way to treat people? And that's their country, right? And he's an El Salvadorian citizen, Kilmar, and I don't know who these people are, but there was a Tren de Aragua indictment the other day that he goes into, says, you know, they were hacking people up and stuff. Is a tattoo actual hostilities? He says, but they can't be removed to a place where their freedom can be taken away. This proclamation is contrary to the law, says this lunatic judge. Anything else you want to tell me? We disagree, Your Honor. We believe the Alien Enemies Act is still good law, and the INA is superfluous when that's invoked. Okay, well, I've heard your arguments. I don't care. Just invalidated the whole proclamation. Hellerstein says, I've heard your arguments, okay? ACLU, gangbanger lawyer Gellert come out, and he's the same dude who called in and left that voicemail on the judge, got obliterated for that. So you know what his voice sounds like, but we'll spare ourselves. He says, Your Honor, as you pointed out, there has to be a notice sufficient to contest the allegations, and an English form just doesn't do it. The Supreme Court granted a stay, and so we'll see going forward. Now, we're asking for 30 days notice, just like the Germans got in World War II. Oh, were those the lawful resident Germans who were here? Were those the citizen Germans? Or were they illegally here in the country? Was that the same? They got 30 days notice for being lawful residents. And by the way, right, all the FDR stuff was pretty rough. And like, I think he's kind of conceding then that we can use the Alien Enemies Act, because FDR used the Alien Enemies Act to go after citizens of America, passed executive orders to follow up with that. But now they're going to turn around and say the Germans got notice and opportunity to be heard, but were then removed by their lover boy FDR. What? Hellerstein says, and a list of other lawyers who are available. So, okay, 30 days and a list of other lawyers who are available to help, right? Just give them a bunch of lawyers who are going to work for free, pro bono. Well, we also suggest that class counsel be notified, okay? Not just a list. So tell the ACLU too, we're going to be on it. If anybody needs help, the ACLU is going to represent these illegals. Now, they also said, well, Colorado has settled on 21 days. So we suggest 30 days here. Judge Hellerstein says, well, let me go back. Let me think about this. Congress declares war, right? Not the president. And the proclamation implies that Tren de Aragua has been sanctioned, if not more, by the government of Venezuela. And so you can review that. ACLU says, well, I suggest you look at Judge Henderson's thoughtful decision in JGG. He says, yeah, but she was reversed by, that was the Boasberg case. Yeah, but she was reversed by the Supreme Court, says Hellerstein. Well, not on that point she wasn't. When the AEA came out, we were concerned about Quebec, weren't we? Cuts him off. ACLU says, no. We were concerned about France itself, and France was only Quebec. So again, this is where this is going to go. They're going to say that the Alien Enemies Act is only for defined nation states. Like you could go for it after Venezuela, but not Tren de Aragua. So a proclamation for TDA is invalid. A proclamation for MS-13 is invalid. Now, I think you could go back and find evidence of that. I think you could find evidence the FDR invoked this against named powers of World War II, right? Which was, of course, the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians. But he also used this to go after others. I think the Hungarians and others. He even went down to South America and went after people from Peru and stuff like that. So he was really using an expansive version of that. It's not just named enemy combatants, but the judge is even saying, oh, well, what about Quebec? Like they weren't named at war, or like in Britain, War of 1812. I think they used it for Britain, but that was a named opponent. So the ACLU is drawing this back. No, only for France. He's saying, but it was Quebec, right? So it was kind of an offshoot. It's like ridiculous. The Alien Enemies Act is for those unnamed things that don't fit into the category of war. We can just declare war. We know how to do that. It's already written in there. We didn't need an Alien Enemies Act to declare war on a nation state. It's for alien enemies who don't fit neatly into another category. But this is going to be where they hang their hat on. They're going to try to invalidate the entire thing. Now, judge says, well, I'm going to give you everything you want. TRO is extended and the case is adjourned. Now, similarly, you heard them reference the Colorado Colorado case. Colorado's crazy. They did the same thing over here. So this was another one filed in the District of Colorado. This is DBU and RMM. I don't know if they're gangbangers or just illegals or what, but the judge dropped a 35-pager that's granting them a bunch of rights, and some might say even more due process than everybody else, which is wild, right? If you're in this category, you get more privileges than other, illegals or other immigrants if you fall into this category. So he says, all right, judge coming down says this is a case involving people who fear imminent transfer from this district. Trump is removing non-citizens, and this is an Alien Enemies Act, right? So it's going to be gangbangers. Saying before the court is a petition for an emergency and saying that he's going to make sure they win, and they win this case. Don't move them out anywhere. Here's some background. Trump issued on March 14th a proclamation. The act says that there's power vested in a president, authority to proclaim an invasion. Lots of people have been suing and challenging this, including the Boasberg case, which we've covered extensively. 5 Venezuelans saying they're about to be deported in a different putative class action. We covered this one, the AARP case, where the Texas judge said, no, you don't get an injunction, and the Supreme Court came down with a stay on that one. Now, as it relates to this case, we've got this person, DBU. He says he's got a single tattoo which bears his niece's name. Oh, it's beautiful. On January 26, days after Trump came in, ICE arrested this dude. At the time of his apprehension, he was attending a party. He said, oh, it's a TDA party. They characterized that as public communications, called him a TDA gangbanger. Agents interrogated him. He denies it. I'm not a gangbanger. No, he's not been criminally charged. He's just subject for deportation. This other person's DBU, detained in Denver. In another proceeding, oh, look, due process. In an April 17, 2025 immigration proceeding, an immigration judge indicated that ICE suggests that DBU has a gang affiliation. There you go. That's due process. You might not agree with that due process. You might not like the outcome, but that is process. Saying there is a grave risk of ICE alleging that he's a member and that ICE will invoke the act against him. So that's why they're suing. This other person, RMN, entered the United States, born in 2000. So the dude is 25, give or take, entered the United States around 2023. Married, 2 children, wife and child live in Colorado. Several tattoos for personal reasons, including 1 tattoo of religious significance. He's extremely afraid to return to Venezuela because he's going to be harmed by groups there because TDA murdered his wife's father and uncle and more, saying TDA is going to murder him too. ICE filed a redacted form in his bond case saying he's an associate and active of TDA, known member of the gang. In support of the form, ICE recounted circumstances of his arrest on March 1, informed everybody that they conducted surveillance of another individual, not him, for an investigation. Then they say someone left the address, approached other Hispanic males. ICE determined these individuals, including one of whom was RMM, were amenable to removal and more. Sounds like they got a lot of due process there. Form also details search of a Jeep and motel room. He denies any connections to that. Obviously, he's got no prior criminal history or pending charges other than the fact that he's here illegally. So he's currently being detained. He's pending immigration removals and more. They say he's going to be tortured. He's going to have persecution if he goes back there. Him and his wife deny this. They say he is seeking asylum because he's been persecuted by TDA. So they're currently in removal proceedings in immigration court, and despite lodging allegations contrary to this, they say that they've not been given notice under the proclamation. I say, no, we've reviewed the facts. We've determined he is not subject to the proclamation, RMM, but if we do that, then we'll remove him. Now, consistent with these representations, they say, we've adopted processes and more. The government, before removing these people, gives everybody notice of removal. The notice says, any statement you make now can be used against you. The notice clarifies, this is not a removal order under the INA, permits you to make a phone call if you want to do so. Here's a certificate of service, making sure you got this. The notice is in English. The government did not give it to them in any other language than English. So what happened is they thought, we're going to get removed. So they filed for an injunction. On April 14th, pursuant to the All Writs Act, the court issued an order, don't remove these people from this location. Everybody filed their responses, and here we are. They say, before we get to the argument, the court first addresses habeas corpus. The parties agreed at oral arguments that habeas claims impose a jurisdictional requirement, and the court turns to the TRO, balancing all of the items, and saying, we are following what SCOTUS told us to do. Accordingly, they satisfied the habeas in custody requirement, and so we're here. So I can handle this case. There are going to be real harms. This is not a harm on presidential powers. And they also say that you can't review this, right? This is one of Trump's arguments. It was judicial review in the Ludecky case, but here is what the order is in conclusion. Colorado judge says, after all of that, same reasons we've seen in other cases, Trump shall not move the petitioners and members of the certified class outside of Colorado. Don't move them to Texas. You shall provide them 21 days notice to members of the provisionally certified class Yes, the notice shall state the government intends to remove them pursuant to the act, must also provide notice of the right to seek judicial review under habeas, and inform them they may consult an attorney regarding their detainment and the government's intent to remove them. It must be written in the language they understand, must be provided, saying to all these people, all non-citizens in custody in Colorado who are subject to the proclamation. All right. So he didn't say that they get a list of free attorneys, but that you may consult an attorney. Okay. The New York judge was like, give them the ACLU's phone numbers so they can call them and they'll represent them for free. So this judge is not going as far, but he is giving them 21 days. That's a long time. And so the ACLU is just going to be there. And I don't know who's funding these lawsuits, but man, there must be a lot of money going into their coffers. Now, the gangbanger lawyers shall also file an injunction to convert this into that and more. The TRO, file your responses and more. So don't move any of these people. Signed by Charlotte Sweeney, U.S. District Judge out of Colorado. So now there's reaction to this from the Republicans. While it might seem frustrating that these judges are doing what they're doing, the Republicans are basically eating it up. The Hill tells us they're leaning in on this. White House and Republicans are not shying away from battling with Democrats over this, especially Kilmar. In their view, it doesn't hurt Trump at all. May even help. Someone said, of course it's a winning issue. Americans support enforcing the law. Common sense tells you this. Polls confirm it. If Democrats want to talk about MS-13 and become the Dem-S-13 gang, well, we're happy to oblige them, a senior White House official explained. The National Republican Congressional Committee, and hat tip to Bonnie on this for flagging this, House Republicans and their campaign arm went as far as to offer to pay for Democrats and their trips to El Salvador. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, we'll pay for it. Go down there, have some margaritas, some mojitos, whatever you want. As they demanded Abrego Garcia's release on the condition, they live streamed the whole thing and snapped plenty of selfies with your gangbanger Dem-S-13 members. We'll pay for the plane tickets. They just can't forget to smile for the camera while they sell out their constituents, says Michael Marinella after they made that announcement. Exactly what some Democrats have been worrying about. Colleagues are sounding the alarm on this. Amy Klobuchar, and you can see who stayed quiet on a lot of this, right? Amy Klobuchar said on State of the Union on Sunday that the White House picked out this case and this man because it's about a subject that they want to keep in the news. I don't think so. I mean, they were just deporting people. You guys turned it into something and then suddenly realized, oh, he beats his wife. Great. And Gavin Newsom said, you know, it's the distraction of the day. This is the debate they want. This is their 80-20 issue. You guys won't stop talking about it. Chris Van Hollen, who traveled to El Salvador, met with him saying, I don't think it's ever wrong to stand up for the Constitution. For gangbangers, and Americans are tired of elected officials who are all finger to the wind. What's blowing this way? What's blowing that way? But as Democrats battle over the right tactics, actions from the White House say they're leaning in. Caroline Leavitt said, Kilmar is never going to live in the United States ever again. Johnson leaned in on it too. Today, House Democrats traveled to El Salvador as part of their obsession to bring a violent illegal alien, wife-beating gang member back into the United States. Could the contrast be more clear? Yeah, here are the polls. April 9th through the 13th, CNBC Hart Research poll. 52% of adults approved of Trump's handling of deporting the illegals. March 27th, 58% of adults approved of Trump deporting illegals. Harry Enton also reported Trump's net approval on immigrations +1, a stark contrast from -12 in the first part of his first term. But there's a lot of nuance to this, and John Kennedy hasn't got his facts straight. Unfortunately, the senator calling the deportation a screw up. It wasn't a screw up, John. It was exactly right. So stop with that. Someone needs to shake the Republicans' heads and say, stop it. It was a poison pill. Who was fired? He was lawfully deported under the Alien Enemies Act, which overrides the withholding of the removal issued by an Article 2 immigration judge. It's like they've never understood the concept between the two distinctions. So that happened. We also see that Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi came out. Todd Blanche posted this over on the interweb, said, under President Trump and Pam Bondi, the DOJ is all in on Operation Take Back America, a bold effort to stop illegal immigration, dismantle cartels, and protect our communities from violent crime. Saying here from Todd Blanche about how attorneys are bringing real results this week. But there is a lot happening. You can see this one was also posted by them. 27 members or associates of Tren de Aragua charged with racketeering, narcotics, trafficking, robbery, and other firearms offenses. First RICO charges against the TDA members and their associates. And just to be clear, you don't have to charge somebody with a crime before you deport them, which is also a fake narrative that they're trying to confuse people on. By being here illegally, you are deportable. That's how it works. You don't have to be charged with a crime. You should maybe for being here illegally, but we don't always do that. We just deport you without having to process you through the criminal proceedings, because that takes a lot of time. So as an administrative enforcement of the law, we have immigration operating under Article 2. So Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, and the rest of them are going to enforce the law. Here's what Todd had to say about it.
As President Trump took office, the Department of Justice has been all in on Operation Take Back America.
Heck yeah.
A mission mission to stop illegal immigration, dismantle cartels, and protect our communities from violent crime. Week after week, U.S. attorneys across this country, including the 6 border districts, have charged hundreds of defendants with federal immigration crimes. These aren't minor cases. They involve drug traffickers, human smugglers, repeat offenders, and individuals with felony records. This is what law and order looks like in action. To our U.S. attorneys and law enforcement partners, thank you. Your work is saving lives and making America safer every day, and we're proud to stand with you. Under President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi, this Justice Department will never back down. We will take back America, one case at a time.
Let's go, Todd Blanche. All right, so the battle will continue. Obviously, the judges are doing everything they can to extend their facade of due process over illegal aliens and gang members who are proclaimed to be threats to national security under the Alien Enemies Act and via presidential proclamation. But they're now offering them free attorneys, pro bono lawyers, so that they can just go work with the ACLU to keep them here as long as possible and to stop Trump from enacting the will of the country. It's a judicial insurrection and a judicial coup. We're going to be here to continue to cover it. Thank you for subscribing and joining us as we do.